and welcome to Spotlight on Chabot. My name is Catherine Pinkas, and I'm a member of the faculty of Chabot College and the president of a business club called the DECA Club. And I met a very special person named Ellen Corbett as part of the work that I do with students at Chabot College. And I learned more about her life, and as I did that, I discovered a person who was an extraordinary advocate for the Chabot Las Positas Community District. Her relationship began actually as a student at Chabot, and like many of the students that she teaches, her early experiences sparked in her a passion for public service and civic engagement. She went on to serve our local area as a council member and was actually the first woman to be elected as the mayor of San Leandro. She's represented the Chabot Las Positas District Service Area in the California legislature for 14 years, first as a state assembly member and then as our state senator. During her time in the Senate, she was honored to be elected by her peers to serve as the majority leader for the California Senate. Can you imagine what a wonderful mentor this is for our students? She currently is serving as a director for the East Bay Regional Park District, and throughout her time in public service, she has continued to be connected to our district in many significant ways. As a legislator, she was a strong and vocal advocate for the community, the colleges, and fought successfully to restore funding levels. Very important at this time as we look at different kinds of budgets that we're using for our community colleges. She visited campus often and shared her experience with students and supported student college programs and initiatives. The legislation she carried out was inspired by the conversation she had with students and faculty, including her pioneering efforts to drive down the cost of textbooks. This is a true burden for our students, and this is very helpful. She returned to teach political science at Chabot and Las Positas in 2005 before heading back to the Capitol to serve in the Senate. She is now back with us on campus teaching student leadership and serving as faculty advisor to the Chabot College Student Senate. I want to welcome Ellen. Welcome, Ellen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
You're welcome. I want to start with just all those things I just talked about, Ellen. Leadership, collaboration, community service. The list of accomplishments are major, and they're breathtaking from my perspective. It's a life of service. What makes you tick? What makes you want to get up in the morning and do all of those things?
Well, thank you, Catherine. You're very kind. I'm very fortunate that I get to do work that I love, and I've been able to do that for many years. I think my passion for public service started at a very young age. I remember conversations around the table about the importance of giving back. I was very fortunate that my grandmother lived with us when I was very young, and she was an amazing woman. She had immigrated to this country. She left her country because there wasn't much opportunity for her. She really didn't have much. She came from a very humble background. But when she came to this country, she was able to achieve things she would never been able to achieve at home. And she would always tell me, you know, this country has been so great to me. I need to give back. And I just remember that as a lesson, words of my grandmother. And it's something that has always stuck with me. And I just believe that it is important to be part of a community or a greater state or nation to give back. And that's one reason why I'm so honored to be here on campus to teach my students, because I get to be in a classroom full of students who want to give back and believe in social justice. So to have the opportunity to work with them and teach them a few lessons I've learned along the way is truly a privilege.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Later on, we'll be able to show you some shots and videos of some of the things that Ellen did with the students. So stay tuned for that because it'll be very, very interesting. The education that you got after you left to Chabot College, Where did you go for your bachelor's degree?
So after my bachelor's, after leaving Chabot College, I went to Cal State. We called it Cal State Hayward at the time.
Right.
I was very fortunate that I got to spend 1 year abroad as well in Florence, Italy. And then I came back and went to UC Davis and graduated from UC Davis with a degree in political science.
And then you went on to have a law degree.
Yes, then I went on to have a law degree. I'm a graduate of McGeorge School of Law, which is part of the University of the Pacific. I went back to law school after graduating from college and working for a while, and then I worked my way through law school. And while I was in law school, I worked at the state capitol. So that's where I started to get an idea about the importance of what legislators do.
I think that this kind of understanding of your life and how it wove into your life of service is really important for our students and for all of us to understand, because I think we don't really understand how people get to the legislature, what drives them in that direction. And so from your grandmother through work and service that you did, that's very, very exciting and interesting. It makes sense as a thread for what you're doing. So I just want to go over some of the things that I read that I found were extraordinary in what you did, because they're very important, and I think people will be interested in it. First of all, when you were in the Senate, you actually authored 160 bills.
Yes, I did.
Isn't that an extraordinary amount of work?
Yes, I have an excellent batting average in the state legislature, and I was always someone who was a student of process and procedure, and that gave me a little bit of an edge. It didn't hurt either that I had worked for the legislature and I was a staffer prior to being a legislator. And I also stayed very, very close to my community and tried to make sure that I knew what was on people's minds, what sort of things that they would want me to work on as a legislator, and that helped me be successful in choosing important policy work. And that helped lead to 160 bills being signed by the governor.
Just so you understand, I'm going to just read some of these things that she did, because I think that it points to how helpful having someone who cares this deeply about her community can be. So you worked on requiring seismic safety for K through 12 school buildings.
Yes, yes.
You provided student loan options and risk information to students so they understood what they were getting into. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about a half a dozen of these that I think are absolutely extraordinary. Protecting the privacy of domestic violence victims.
Yes.
And I see a lot with internet privacy, with understanding gender identity and sexual orientation, for making sure that minors don't get e-cigarettes. These are just incredibly important things that perhaps we take for granted these days because they came through the legislature, and now we don't have as much, thanks to your efforts and that of the legislature, to get them done. The other one that I saw, that you were the lead author of the Historic California Homeowner Bill of Rights. What does that mean?
Well, a number of years ago, I'm sure people do remember the terrible crisis that we had where people were losing their homes because of negotiated mortgages that were ballooning out of people's reach. And so banks were foreclosing on homes. Entire neighborhoods were being foreclosed upon. And obviously, as a legislator who was paying attention to the people in my community, I was hearing from people. Even neighbors on my same block contacted me and said, we're at risk of losing our home. Is there anything you can do for us? So I just jumped into that issue with both feet and tried to determine if there was some way we could make sure that people had more of a chance to stay in their homes, to see if there was a way to renegotiate terms. They were just taking the home instead of saying, is there some way we can work with you to keep you in your home? So one of the very important regulations in this legislation was to require the banks to reach out to
when
them.
I was in graduate school, they taught us that 80% of problems were process problems.
Yes, I agree with that,
And,
Catherine.
and actually, as I teach my students, I tell them my own personal experience has been it's more like 90%.
Yes.
That people are often well-intended, but they just don't know what they're supposed to be doing, and having that process orientation really helps. That, to me, is also a skill that's important in leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
And I know we've talked about this, especially with regard to Chabot College, so we'll get back to that in a few minutes. But right now, there are some other things that you've championed that I just want to highlight here. Child safety, consumer, personal, and financial data security. You worked on the BRAIN initiative. What's that?
The BRAIN initiative was an attempt to develop a program. We were successful with it, by the way, to model after the federal law that allowed for additional research to start mapping the brain, the work that's done within the brain. With our new technologies, you know, medicine primarily over the last several years has been the outside of the body, but with our new technologies, we can now start mapping the brain and determining how it works so we can then address it and come up with ways to treat illnesses and maladies, things like autism and Alzheimer's. Very important things to address with the number of people we know who suffer. And so we were successful in convincing the legislature to actually set aside funding for additional research, scientific research, medical research.
It's amazing. It's amazing. That and that it happens in California and that you were able to get that accomplished is
Thank you.
So important. You've also been interested in green energy and emerging tech.
One of the largest drivers of the local Bay Area economy in my 10th Senate district was green innovation and green energy development, things like solar energy, those sorts of things. And so not only was it good for the environment, it was good for my local economy and provided jobs to my local constituents. So I had a great passion for that as well.
Oh my goodness, really important. And
Yes.
then your sense of the whole community. I understand that you're a firm believer in marriage equality.
Absolutely.
And that you've worked to make California closer to making this an environment for friendly for everyone who lives in our community.
Absolutely. On the Judiciary Committee, I was able to work very diligently on that issue. And as a matter of fact, over the years, there were attempts to ensure marriage equality. And one of the very first bills that ever passed a legislative committee in the entire country passed out of the Judiciary Committee that I was chairing.
Oh, wonderful. So wonderful. Can you imagine how helpful this is for students to have access to a resource like this? I'm so grateful you're here.
I'm just lucky I get to spend the time with the students. That's how I look at it.
It's really true. But do you find any time for yourself?
Once in a while.
Okay. So by the way, you will notice these beautiful flowers over here. What you can't know is that they smell wonderful. These are beautiful roses, and they're tea roses, I believe.
Yes, they are.
And they smell beautifully. Is that one of your hobbies?
Yes, it is. I love to garden. And in fact, after I left the legislature, because I had a tiny bit more time, I actually studied to become a master gardener. And even before I was a master gardener, I've always had a love of roses. This is something else I learned from my grandmother and my mother, who are both avid rose growers. So I probably have close to 100 different types of roses in my garden.
My goodness. I hope we'll get some pictures of those to show people
yes.
at the end. And so now you've done that. You've helped us in many areas, giving selflessly as you can in different kinds of ways. Now working with the Student Senate and training our student leaders. If you're a member of a club here, if you're an officer of a club or an officer of the school, you get the opportunity to train with Ellen to be able to enrich your ability to what will probably end up being lifelong leadership and service in some capacity because you model it for them.
Yes, I hope and I know we're sending off some really talented leaders to
Yes.
take care of us in the future. There's no doubt in my mind.
last night you were at a meeting,
Yes, I was.
a transit meeting.
Yes, AC Transit.
Okay, we have a problem. We have 4,500 students who
That's right.
lost their bus service. And what happened? What did you do?
Well, over the summer, AC Transit decided to cancel the bus 22, which was the one direct bus line from South Hayward. And students who take that bus now have to take 2 or 3 buses to get to school and to get home. They have to make connections. It sometimes makes them late for class. Sometimes they feel they have to leave class early. So the students wanted to make sure they got the attention of AC Transit to let them know what an impact it had on their lives. 1,700 students answered the survey, and we were able to, last night, there was about, how many students? About 12 students attended the AC Transit meeting. They presented the data, they told their personal stories, and I truly believe not only was it a very valuable lesson that their voice matters and that they can make a difference for their fellow students, but I think they truly had an impact on those elected board members. In fact, one of them, after the presentation, stated, there are certainly a lot of things we're going to have to look into after hearing this presentation. So I feel very good about it. The students did an awesome job. I was very proud of them, and they did a great job for their fellow students here at Chabot.
I think that's so important. And I think this does bring people together because the legislators might not have had any idea that this was going on. By being able to be civically active, you can point to what you need, which is one of the great strengths that's available in this country.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you just a couple more questions? Because right now we're facing the community college district is facing a real challenge because of the changes in how we're being funded for community college. Our mandate continues to expand to help students get jobs and get jobs that can keep them in the Bay Area. You've had so much experience with the legislature and so much experience with even working with the colleges. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about this?
Absolutely. I've been following very closely what's been happening in the legislature even after I've left. Before I left the legislature, I had the opportunity to work with my colleagues to restore community college funding that had been taken in past, economic downturn years. And so when I saw that the legislature was developing a new funding formula, I looked at it very, very carefully. Now, the funding formula sets out to do some very laudable things to attempt to have students graduate sooner and with certificates and be successful. But unfortunately, in looking at this formula, it impacts certain community colleges in a bigger way than others. For example, community colleges that might be in areas that are more economically challenged and where there are higher costs of living, students might not necessarily graduate as quickly because, as we know here with our experience on our campus, most of our students are working students. They work very hard, they come to school, they go back to work, and so in order to afford the cost of living here, it might take them a little longer to graduate. So this funding formula, I believe that it was put together in a well-meaning way, but it impacts our students in a very difficult way. Because I have the experience in the legislature, I got very involved last year with other faculty members and administrators and students in developing an advocacy plan. Several of us went to Sacramento, we attended hearings, President Sperling attended hearings, students attended hearings, and they testified, and they actually did make an impact. The formula was passed by the legislature, but at least they decided to give a 2-year window before there's implementation of it. And that was caused by the advocacy of local community college, faculty, staff, students. What I'm hoping is in this window of time of the 2 years that we'll be able to do what we can to tell the stories to the legislature, to make some changes to this formula so that it doesn't impact our district as strongly as it does now. But I am very concerned about it. But I feel very fortunate that I have the skills, and also, I still have relationships with legislators that I'm able to use for the betterment to also advance, our story here at Chabot and Los Positas, so they can understand the impact and they can make important changes.
And I think that the boon for us here at Chabot College is that you can translate this for us as well.
Yes, and I'm very happy to do that and,
And
give up my time for that.
Because we have to make changes, we have to make adjustments that are going to be needed in order to implement the really positive aspects of this.
Yes.
And to get our students ready for it.
Absolutely.
So buying us a little time is just terrific.
Yes.
That's what we need. We need to be able to take time.
Yes.
To take the steps that are needed so that the education, which is so important, really benefits all of the students.
Yes. We want to achieve those goals, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't hurt our students.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for your time today.
You're so very welcome.
Did I leave anything out, or are we good for now?
Oh, I think we're good for now. I appreciate having the time to get to know you better and tell a little bit about my story.
I hope that you all have enjoyed this interview, and I really hope that you have a chance to meet Ellen. She's here on campus, and she has an office here, so look her up if you'd like to. This is Catherine Pinkas with Spotlight on Chabot.